Hey, this is Clint with ATS, and today we're going to install our compound kit for the 17 Ford. What's unique about this turbo kit is it's fully emissions on, which means there's no deletion required, which in previous years, up leading for the last 10 years, to really get performance out of a vehicle, you have to pretty much delete the emission system, which, all of our products is emissions on. And I tell you what's impressive today about these systems is they work so well, by keeping the full emissions on that it, you don't have to strip any of that off. So it's very exciting times. One of the things about compound trucks in the past was you pretty much had a second turbo to get a lot more power, to really increase the power levels of the vehicle. And it wasn't necessarily for, real heavy towing or whatever. Anytime you increase airflow through the engine, it absolutely gives you more power. But the real key today is, these trucks are coming out of the factory with almost 400 horsepower. And 400 horsepower is generally about where you want to be when you're towing heavy. Sometimes you want a little bit more power, but the big thing is you always want to maintain that power level. So it really tends to happen with today's trucks, whether it's a Dodge, a GM, or a Ford, is they're rated a higher horsepower level, but as soon as you start towing and pulling your fifth wheel, pulling your boat, any grades, anything at all, the engine hot soaks because there's so much under the hood. And the turbochargers are relatively small, mainly because the emissions driven portion of it, they have to spool very quickly to get that airflow so you don't make the black smoke, which basically soot loads your after treatment system. So what the manufacturers are forced to do is put a small turbo on it, which gives you a nice response and fair mid-range. But the upper end power level, when you're towing really heavy, really isn't where it should be. And it begins to derate. And then as you start pulling and the engine gets hotter and hotter and hotter, then the ECM begins to derate the engine, which means it starts to take fuel out of the engine, mainly because increased fuel in a diesel means you're going to make more power. You get to a point you run out of air, you start making black smoke, and that equates to high EGTs. So high exhaust gas temperatures is really the killer of these vehicles and really the killer performance. So by installing a turbocharger or a second turbocharger like our system, we add a big turbocharger in front of the small high pressure turbo. So your high pressure turbo still has the VGT operation, it still has your exhaust brake function. We just add another turbo in front of it. So as you begin to run out of the small turbo, then the second turbo is actually gulping that air from the outside and compressing it in a very efficient manner and pushing it into the high pressure turbo. And then you have a compounding effect, and that's basically why you call it compound turbos on a diesel engine instead of twin turbos, because there's not two separate turbos, you have a compound configuration, which means you compress that air very efficiently. It doesn't generate the heat, so you have more mass of air going into the engine. As it goes to the intercool, you have more oxygen content to burn the fuel, so then you can gradually increase the amount of fuel. And especially in these cases, what's really nice about the compounds is, like I was saying, when you're pulling, say you're headed up a grade and you have your fifth wheel behind it, your camper trailer, your boat, your motorcycle trailer, or all of the above, then the engine begins to get so hot from heat saturation, the computer has to defuel, it starts taking that fuel away. So the reality of it is these trucks really don't have that 400 horsepower when you're pulling. They end up backing down, to 300 horsepower, sometimes even less, until the engine, so the engine doesn't melt, right? So by the addition of the additional turbo, and in this case we're also going to do a twin fueler, which maximizes or maintains your fuel pressure, so you can increase a little bit more fuel. By adding that extra airflow, it actually allows the engine to continue to make the power that it was making from the factory, and then we can add a little bit more and still maintain that power level. So the really cool thing about it is these are work trucks. These are what these kits are designed for. They're everyday drivers. You might be a construction worker, you might be a toy hauler, you might be driving around town, but the nice thing is it does it all. So, the guy that wants to hook his fifth wheel to the back, go camping, pull these extremely heavy loads, which we all do with these trucks, you're not going to have to worry about the reliability engine because the engine runs cooler. You don't have to worry about defueling because you have the airflow of the second turbocharger. And at the end of the day, basically what that means is you're going to maintain a higher power level. This system will be about 650 horsepower when we're done with it. So it's pretty substantial increase, and the name of the game is reliability. You want to put something on here, it's all cast components, it's all the same stuff, it's very factory level. type engineering. The way the exhaust manifolds, the systems are completely engineered. It's a very, very well-defined kit that goes on these vehicles. So we're going to go ahead and get a baseline on this truck. As soon as we get a baseline, then we're going to roll over to the install shop and then install our turbo kit and twin fueler, and then of course put in our software that allows all the emissions on componentry to work. Then we're going to bring it back over here and do another test run. So we're going to go and get started with the dyno run. Well, we just made our run on the 17 Ford, and as you'll see that things don't always work out exactly like the manufacturer presents them, but it's pretty typical. So we had a little bit lower number than it expected. Again, this is a totally stock truck. You know, they have pretty high gears, but it also has oversized tires, which we kind of forgot about. So it has, you know, large 35s on it. So, you know, it just effectively, it changes the gear ratio, so they just don't make as much power. But what you'll see here is we actually made about 330 horsepower, 760 foot-pounds of torque, which is pretty typical. You know, these trucks at sea level will make about 375 to 390 foot-pounds or horsepower. And, you know, this is a real-world truck, I mean, we ran this thing really hard, you know, to make sure it was hot soaked, that it was going to derate as much as we could make it on the dyno. So this is really the worst-case scenario, and we're at 6,000 feet. So that's pretty typical, you know, around 330, 340 horsepower is what you would actually be pulling your trailer up the pass with. So we'll make the same dyno run after we add the twin fueler and the compound turbos. So we're going to increase that airflow, and we're going to increase the fuel a little bit, and then of course put our software in it to turn it up a bit, and we'll find numbers that are going to be substantially higher than this. So we're going to go ahead and start the install and circle back here when we get the install done. Hey guys, so we're here starting our turbo install. So we're adding the Aurora 6000 compound turbo, which is our plus kit. So you might see something here that's we're right in the middle of the install, and our turbo fits right here where the EGR cooler is. Well, in our kit, we take this EGR cooler and we actually relocate it underneath the front of the motor, and then our pedestal for the turbo has all the ports for the EGR coolant, and the EGR feed comes out of the manifold, comes down around the bottom, which we'll get down there and show you that here in a little bit. And then the whole assembly is moved, so we have our EGR maintained as factory, and then the turbo sits here and feeds this guy. So here in a little bit we'll get this off, show where that's mounted, and then show you how the turbo fits, and really nice clean install. So we've just got the install done on the 17 Ford F350 or 250 with a 6.7 engine in it. And you know, this is pretty exciting for us. We've got the full emissions on turbo kit. So what we've done on this system is added the secondary 6000 turbo, added the twin fueler. Of course, we're adding the twin fueler mainly because we're running a little bit higher, bigger program, so we maintain that atomization and the exhaust clean, so we're not going to soot load. And this is pretty much our production compound kit with twin fueler, EGR coolers underneath, secondary turbo, and the twin fueler, and then of course software. And we're going to go ahead and make a run here, see what kind of power it makes. Remember, we started out, you know, in the 360 horsepower range, and we're shooting for that 600 horsepower range and around 1,200 foot-pounds. So let's see what we got going. Damn, now that is impressive numbers right there. So we just got our dyno run done. We just picked up a little bit of power here. We started at 339 horsepower and ended up at 635 horsepower. Now I'll tell you what, one of the most impressive things here is 700 foot-pounds of torque went to 1,300 foot-pounds of torque. That's a very impressive run. And remember, this is with all the emissions equipment on this truck. That's doubling the horsepower, doubling the torque of this engine. Now remember, this is a stock motor. No head studs in it. It's really designed for a towing setup. We've added the twin CP3 to maintain that fuel rail pressure so it's clean. We've added the 6000 turbo to give it that extra airflow, which means it's going to run cool. It's not going to get hot. It's not going to overheat and defuel, and you know, all those types of things that you end up with a stock truck. So I added the program, the turbo, the twin fueler. This is a working man's truck, something you want to take to the dunes, pull your fifth wheel with. pull concrete around, whatever it is. I mean, this is the age of diesel where we're doubling the horsepower, doubling the torque, and it's emissions on. Very exciting stuff. So now we're going to put this thing out to work, pulling some trailers, and we'll see what the customer thinks about it. So on the road test with Keith, he's just picking up his truck after last night and drove it around for a day. And kind of want to get your opinion of what you thought about the truck and, you know, what you're kind of looking for.
Well, I like pulling my trailers and like running clean fuel and everything, and not having the smoke and smut covering up my trailers and my cars. I hollow my trailers. I got into this. I bought this thing. I've had it right at a year now, and I've always wanted a truck powered like Clint's. I've watched him for the last 20 years drive these fantastic trucks, and it's always been my dream to have one. Well, I do have one now, and it's a mighty fine vehicle. The power this thing has, when you get on it, it's just unbelievable. As you might have seen a while ago, this thing's building up to 40 pounds of boost on the turbo. And at the same time we did the compound turbo to it, we went ahead and added a suspension kit to it that just really tuned this truck up great. Very, very happy with the control of it, the power it's got. I mean, you can sit here, we're doing 100 miles an hour in a matter of seconds. It's just amazing what power this thing has.
And it's really nice when you can combine technology and performance. You know, in today's trucks, you know, Ford has done such a good job of designing the after treatment system and giving us such a great platform to work on. And, you know, by us literally adding the second turbo, adding the second injector pump to maintain that rail pressure, and then tweaking on the tuning software, you know, it gives you such a powerful combination of, you know, technology, big power on the diesel, do pretty much whatever you want, and, you know, it's clean. So it's a pretty good time to be in diesel performance these days.
Well, it's not just the power. I'm impressed with the overall package, the nice clean look, the chrome pipes that are on it. It's just, you pop the hood and it's like a showpiece under there.
This thing does have lungs on it.
It does have a set of lungs. Of course, speedometer only goes up to 100 miles an hour. We're probably doing 120, 130 right now, which will shut her down for the nice highway patrolman up here decides to write Clint a ticket. Get a pull on the hill here, see what we can do going up the hill.
You know, one of the things that you'll find with this package is your engine temperatures won't race up where the factory, just the factory single turbocharger, if you put any more fuel in these things, you know, it starts to push engine temperatures. And you'll find that this setup with the secondary turbo, you know, you get so much airflow that it won't overheat the engine, which basically allows you to pull heavy with it, you know, at the higher speeds or elevation, or, you know, have really heavy loads. And that additional airflow burns the diesel, turns it into power instead of letting it just go out the exhaust and heat, which eventually raises your engine temperatures, and then the engine temperatures force the engine to derate the engine down on horsepower so it doesn't burn itself down. So, you know, really adding that turbo not only gives you the performance, but it gives you the durability and the reliability that you need, you know, when you're pulling heavy. So that's one of the huge advantages to add that turbo on top of the factory turbo.
Well, what really sold me on this, Clint, is I think about, it was last March, I believe it was, we went up to Moab, Utah, and I had this truck. I'd only had this truck for 4 or 5 months at the time, and Clint's pulling, what, about 30,000 pound trailer or so?
Yep.
I followed you all the way to Moab, up I-70 through the mountains, and it was everything I could do to keep up with him without a trailer. And as we traveled through the hill, it was like Clint never knew he had a trailer on his. It pulled so well.
Just love the smoothness. Everything's quiet, no rattly pipes, very factory.
Well, she definitely runs. I can see probably a stack of tickets coming in the future.
That's not part of the kit.